The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Guided. And we are back this week with Catherine Ann, our resident intuitive astrologer, who incorporates her background in tarot, channeling, and the healing arts in her uniquely guided approach to reading the messages in the stars. So Catherine is back with us this week to shed some light on this upcoming full moon. So Catherine, welcome back. And I'm just going to turn this right over to you to dive right in.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. I'm so excited to be back. So we are going to be talking today about the full moon in Capricorn. It is happening on June 21st. And Pacific time, it's happening at 6:07 p.m. So you're going to adjust for your time zone. In the Eastern time zone, it's going to be at 9:07 p.m. And, follow wherever you're at to find your time zone based off of that time. So let's talk about where the full moon is and just what is a full moon. So for the full moon, it is going to be in Capricorn. So that means that the moon is in Capricorn, but the sun is in Cancer, because whenever it's a full moon, they're directly opposite each other. So that's why the full moon in Capricorn is happening during Cancer season. We're actually just moving into Cancer because I believe this is a 1-degree moon. So just barely got in there. So full moons are a culmination point. You've planted your intentions, and now it's going to shed the absolute most amount of light in that area, because full moon is the time when the entire moon is illuminated. And then after that, it starts losing light and going back all the way down to the new moon, and the cycle continues as such. So full moons are like a cosmic spotlight on something. They're going to illuminate an area in our life. They're going to bring things to light around that area and the topics of the moon. And they're also going to reveal areas where you still may be holding back, especially on topics that you're trying to manifest more fully. So you're going to see the manifestation. This is not a seed planting time. You're going to see things coming to light and growing, but there may be more that needs to be done for you to harvest, because we're not quite at harvest time. And so the moon cycle is always great when you're thinking about the planting cycle, because the analogy just fits really well. So this full moon in Capricorn is going to be opposing Venus. Of course, it's opposing the sun. That's what makes it a full moon, but it's also going to be opposing Venus, because Venus has now also moved into Cancer. So at our last lunation, the new moon in Gemini, we had the sun and Venus in Gemini. They've both now moved into Cancer just a few weeks later. And that has a whole different quality of flavor of Venus. So previously, when Venus was in Gemini, it was flirty and social and fun. And it was about, like harmonious social exchanges and harmonious conversations, where now Venus is in Cancer, and it's more focused on this nurturing, homey, beautiful, soft feeling. So like Venus in Cancer is very soft. Cancer represents the family, the home. It's ruled by the moon. So all these ideas that you can relate to the moon, like feminine goddess energy, you can also see how this Venus, which is about beauty and harmony and what we attract into our life. Venus also rules money, by the way. So it's also going to be related to those topics. But when it's in Cancer, it's just going to be harmonizing with that energy of family, intuition, Cancerian topics. Now, the thing about this Venus, though, is it's very close to the sun. And in traditional astrology, we call that combust. And what that means is that basically Venus is so close to the sun, it's being burned up in its rays. And so Venus cannot give its full essence because the sun is kind of overpowering it. So while we do have this soft, lovely, family-oriented, sensitive Venus, it's also a little like in the back seat compared to what it would be or what it will be when it no longer is so close to the sun, because the sun is just overpowering it a little bit. So what is important about this is that, so the moon is in Capricorn. So we're going over to the other side of the chart. The moon is in Capricorn, not its favorite place. It's called being in detriment. And that's because the moon rules Cancer, and Cancer is opposite to Capricorn. So it's in the complete other house on the other side of the world. And it doesn't love that. It's as far away as it could be. So moon in Capricorn, not its favorite place to be. And then we have, I'm kind of going back and forth between the moon, Capricorn, Cancer axis with this sun and Venus, because they're basically speaking back to forth to each other in opposition. And moon rules Cancer, but moon is in Capricorn. Moon's not happy in Capricorn. So that means it's not a very good host to Venus or the sun because it's not very happy. So again, Venus doesn't get to fully be in its element, and neither does the sun. The sun is being ruled by the moon, which is, that's just not its favorite place to be. It wants to be ruled out in the light, not by the luminary that does not have its own light, actually. So this is just this interesting dynamic because it makes it where this full moon, although things are coming to light, there, and it's a much more emotional time because it's Cancer, right? So Cancer in general is just going to be more emotional, emotionally intelligent. Mercury also moved into Cancer. So our thinking is tied to our emotions and our intuition. What we're attracting with Venus is tied to our emotions and intuition. And then the moon's on the other side going, I'm actually going to rain on this parade because I'm not happy where I'm at. So, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And Saturn, we talked about in the new moon and how in Gemini, how Saturn played a role. Saturn's playing a role again because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and now the moon is in that house or in that sign. So we're looking at this moon that wants to be kind of soft and flowy, and it's in a container, and it's hard-edged. It's harder for the moon to access all of its wonderful qualities when it's in Capricorn, and Capricorn is kind of like more hardline. So this is just something to know about this full moon that, well, yes, things are going to be coming to light, and yes, you're going to see culmination of things that were planted back in December, January, when the new moon in Capricorn was happening. It's just a little bit edgier. It's
So edgier in the form of, is there a rigidity? Is it like the energy of, because as a Capricorn, as you're describing me, I'm getting the feeling of, is it like where we dig our heels in or where we create these like walls or barriers and like don't let the light in because it feels like a self-protection mechanism, honestly. Like for me, right, Cancer and emotions and right, that gets into a vulnerability that does not feel so great to someone who is very Capricorn. And so I think about it from as you're describing this, the feeling that I get is one of, emotion intersecting with, but I'm going to wall up because I don't want to feel, it's going to make me feel vulnerable. And I don't want to feel that vulnerability around whatever it is that really wants to be illuminated.
Yeah, and so it's interesting you say that. Both of my kids have moon in Capricorn, and I'm a Capricorn rising. This is a theme in our house, right? This is a theme of emotions are not, I want to say they're not clean lined, right?
Yeah.
Emotions can feel messy. And when you want structure and form and it's not just structure and form too, it's that commitment and dedication. And Capricorns are amazingly successful. They can manifest in the material world in quite impressive ways, but often they do that at the expense of their feelings, right? So I know that I have this pattern myself where I am going to put more energy on achieving the goal than I am on how I feel while I'm doing it.
So is that the energy of this full moon, really looking at how we feel about what we're creating, how we feel about what our goals are, how we feel about the journey? I know for me, the thing that I'm flashing to is as an example, perhaps, and you can tell me if this is on point or not. But, I've spent the last 18 months writing a first draft of my memoir. And as you would imagine in memoir, like you're literally, as a Capricorn, having to crawl back into emotions from that time period. And so, if I'm being honest, I did not enjoy the process. It was not fun to lean into that pain every single day. And yet, I really feel that my soul is a writer. I really love writing. I love expressing in that way. I write my podcast episodes, I write my newsletter. Like there is a part of me that really enjoys crawling into emotion and playing with words and painting with words. And yet this format of memoir, Spirit has recently been telling me, like, now you know what doesn't work. How I moved through that process definitely did not work, which is crushing on one level because it's like, wow, I've just spent 18 months writing a first draft of something that was not an enjoyable process. That doesn't lead me to want to lean in to continue writing this. However, where I'm starting, I completely had to let go of writing this book. Like maybe it gets written, maybe it doesn't. But what I'm now focused on is there a way to do this where I really enjoy the journey? Is it changing the topic? Is it changing how I write? Is it changing my process? And is that what you're speaking to? Because my emotions, right, are a part of this creativity and what's driving the creation. So the Cancer aspect, right, of the emotion is a really important facet. And my Capricorn nature like wants the process, wants to find home in the process of it, right? So am I feeling
Yeah,
into
I think
the
so. I mean, and for you in particular, your Capricorn house is the eighth house. And so that's other people's resources. It's always going to be tied to other. It's also, depending on whether you're looking at traditional or modern, there's going to be different significations, but it is a house of intuition. It's a house of death. It's a house of those deep, dark, I mean, crime and yuckiness, right? But it's also, when I say other people's money, it's investments and it's like the market. So I think for you, what this may be lighting up is twofold. Is it lighting up where you need to access that deeper psychological piece and not just plow through? And are there people in your life whose resources you could benefit from? It's interesting because it's not necessarily the people. It's not the relationship with the person. It's the relationship, it's the person's resources. And how is that going to light up for you? And so I'd be curious if that's something that plays out for you where you go, oh, I know somebody and they have a resource that is going to help me uncover, release, move to the next level of this project.
Okay, so I have to validate you because I literally just took a writing class that I wasn't even going to attend after coming to these conclusions. And this person is a book coach, but the way she helped me to access some of this information is, I think, exactly what you're speaking to. Her resources are unlocking new knowledge, awareness, inspiration within me for a new way of moving forward.
Nice, awesome.
Is
I
that
would imagine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine in that process, you've had to let go of something that you were doing that you thought was working.
I have to let go of not only how I was writing this and how I was feeling about writing it. I'm literally throwing out the book in a sense that it's not, I think I wrote the book because I needed to, it really helped me to heal certain pieces of my journey and myself. And it's not that I have to throw all the writing out. It's that it's not the story I want to tell anymore. Right. And so I was really attached to my story being told in this way, but I'm so not that person anymore that I feel like that was the death, that was the letting go. Like you're going to completely throw out, even though there's a part of me that was like, wow, that was a lot of work to just throw it out, but it was not for naught. Right. And so I think that's the death piece. It's like we're letting go of this vision, we're letting go of what we've created and giving birth now to something completely new, knowing what didn't work, that process didn't work. And now I can create the story I want to tell from a totally new place and hopefully new process that feels much more energizing, rejuvenating, all of those things.
And acknowledging too that the process got you to where you are, right? So it it blossomed, it grew, it came into form,
Yeah.
and now we're in this, okay, what do I need to release to continue on this journey,
Yeah.
right? Maybe the base intention that was set was got to here to the
Mm-hmm.
full moon through that process. And now to continue developing that intention, you're now adjusting, right?
Pivoting for sure.
Moving on, right?
Yeah.
So,
So is that a
um,
good example of like what might come up with this moon? I know it
yeah,
depends on
absolutely.
the chart, but in terms of like what we might have to release in order to,
Yeah, to bring this area, this, whether it's an emotional manifestation, mental, physical manifestation, like for you, actually a book, right? It's a thing. To move this manifestation into the next phase of what do I need to do now to basically harvest, to like to get to where something's going to come out of it. So yeah, that's the process. The other thing about this moon that I haven't talked about yet is has this really interesting dynamic with Neptune. So Neptune is the planet of our dreams. You know, our dream world is Neptunian. It's also, I'm trying the things that are related to Neptune have like film and video and capturing image. It's like magic. Neptune dissolves. So when Neptune comes into contact with things, it has this dissolving, escaping, like super mystical energy. So Neptune has been in Pisces for a while now. It's almost done, but we are going to be sitting at the end of Pisces for a while because it's going to retrograde, but it's sitting in there. So Neptune in Pisces, super dreamy, super dissolving, super energy. So the thing is that we're seeing is, although this is an out of sign square, it is still in square, which means that it's a challenging relationship with the moon. And because it's a full moon and the moon and sun are directly opposite, that means it's also in challenging relationship with the sun. So it's in what's called the T square. So it's squaring both the sun and the moon, which is an energy of challenge, obstacle, not fun energy. So what does that do for this moon? So we have this moon that is Capricornian. It's not dissolving, right? I mean, Saturn does have a mystical quality, but it's very different. It's more structured. So what this Neptune element is doing is it could very much lead us into wanting to escape. This is too hard. I don't even want to see it. This is, I'd rather be codependent and go fall into those everything's okay than actually look at what I need to look at. Because we are in a place, right, of looking at what needs to be released so that we can continue this beautiful manifestation that we're working on. But Neptune is saying, I don't even know what I want. I don't even know how I feel. Actually, even with intuition, it could be causing what I would say is like unclear messages, right? So you're going to need to really look at the discernment piece of your intuitive practice with this, because Neptune is going to be fogging your glasses. And that's just important to know, because here we have the moon that also speaks to your intuition, and it's not happy. It's feeling constricted. And then we have Neptune going with it. And so I just want to say, this is not a time to leap off a cliff because your intuition told you to. You know, those inspired actions are maybe not truly inspired actions. They could be inspired delusions. And so that's a really important element to think about in this full moon is when you're processing, when you're thinking about what you need to do moving forward, are you being honest with yourself? Are you allowing yourself to see it through rose-colored glasses because that feels better? Because if you don't, you have to go into the yucky feelings that Capricorn doesn't like.
Well, and would the opposite also be true, right? Would we be seeing things through our delusion versus, seeing the truth of a situation in terms of, right? You go to more magic, I go more like to the negative, right? And so what you're saying is also striking me like, maybe, right? When you're saying like sometimes things just feel too hard. So we've got this new moon that we talked about in June, which was about committing and a dedication and a persistence. And now in this full moon cycle, we're really speaking to maybe thoughts or illusions or delusions that are coming up for us that maybe lead us to feel like we can't really have something that we desire, something that is diluting our ability to, right, see something through the eyes of love or see the truth of a situation, and instead is leading us to further illusion, and or perhaps we're seeing it through, rose-colored glasses. In some way, shape, or form, we're escaping from the truth that we need to see. Would that be accurate?
Oh, absolutely. And a really kind of practical way to look at all of this, and I didn't mention this before, but so I talked about how the moon is opposite Venus. And Venus isn't very strong right now because it's so close to the sun, but moon opposite Venus can also have us crave sugar, right? We're craving the sweetness. We're craving that salve, right? We're craving something that's going to make us feel better, but it's a short term, right? So there's an element that I feel resonates also with this Neptune part, because Sun square Neptune, the sun can really relate to our purpose and our direction, what we're supposed to be doing. And Neptune is going, I don't know. I thought I wanted this, but I don't know. I can't see clearly. And then the moon square part is going, I'm confused. I can't even keep my boundaries. I'm just like kind of wobbly. And so because you don't know where you're going, you can't figure out your boundaries. You're just like in this, you could go to the people pleaser. You're in this Venus opposite the moon that says, I just want to feel good. And so you could this is a signature that could lead people into their vices.
Okay,
So
so it's like
one
a
of the
bypassing energy, like we might be inclined to bypass the emotion to just get to the better feeling place.
Yes. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that the tarot card for Capricorn is the devil. And in the image of the devil, you see these two figures in bondage. And one of the things that it relates to is kind of like your own self undoing, your own self sabotage. What are the things that you are bound to that create your own bondage, right? So is that going towards sugar instead of processing something? Is that going to, substance abuse where, you would rather drink or, go on some plant journey so that you can float out and escape as opposed to actually seeing what you need to do, what steps you need to take to be in that successful, strong, beautiful Capricorn energy. It's undermining it, right? So that's the feeling that I feel is about the Neptune part is it's going to be very tempting to go towards your vices, spiritual bypass, right? Plant journey instead of actually process emotions. Moon in Capricorn doesn't like to process its emotions, so it would much rather fly away. And that Venus in Cancer, although it's not as strong, it still wants to feel home.
So perhaps that's a question, right? It sounds like one of the questions is, in what ways do you tend to escape? Right. Because whether that's shopping or social media or, right, addictions of various kinds, big or small, I think it sounds like it's worth looking at what are our patterns around inclinations to escape when we don't feel good. We always want to encourage everybody to process their emotions because we know that is where what gets us back to center. But also, to your point, that's, home is where we are. Right. And I do associate Capricorn with this feeling of home. And that's something I've really had to learn how to find. How do we find that sense of safety and security within ourselves, within our own body? Right. And I'm wondering, just as you're talking, it's sort of like looking at like where we escape because we don't feel comfortable at home, but it's at home in our body and we can't feel good in our body and we can't know the truth if we're not aligned, which is why it's so important to process the emotion so we can come back to that place of clarity. So that feels like a theme with this moon. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. And, Cancer is traditionally associated with home. Capricorn's on the other side, but it's a different type of home. It's a home as in safety and security, stability. It's the foundation, right? So it's not, the feeling of home of your mother's cooking. It's financial security. It's security in being, you have a roof over your head. You're safe, that type of home.
So much of what you're saying really strikes me with, the third dimensional paradigm versus the fifth dimensional paradigm in terms of like how would love have us see certain situations, right? So if we are anxious about money issues, right? Can we process that worry? Can we process that fear? Come back to a place of center to understand, is our body actually telling us that we're worried, or do we actually feel safe, even though the uncertainty is the delusion, right? Is feeding the delusion, I should say. To me, so many of the things that might cause us to want to escape are really these lower level like energies or emotions that are going to delude the way we see a situation that blocks us from seeing that higher minded perspective.
And, it's actually a really interesting follow up from the new moon in Gemini, because, if I relate it to my chart, that new moon in Gemini had that element of planting seeds for my health and well being. And then for me, that means as a Capricorn rising, this new moon is in my first house, which does represent your body. So it's kind of 2 weeks later, you're getting challenged on, are you going to follow through with that commitment? Or are you going to go into the delusion because it's hard?
Right. So for you, it could look like, okay, I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to fuel my body differently. And then in this full moon, 2 weeks later, it could show up as, forget it, give me the bag of Oreos, give me, right? Like that moving to an addiction or moving to an old, whatever. I'm back on meat, even though I wanted to do this vegetarian diet. Like it doesn't even have to be an addiction or drastic. It might just be, I can't do this. This is too hard.
This is too hard. And it's interesting because Saturn has worked with us for this whole past time in Pisces to build containers around our spiritual practices. So if we've done that, we have this beautiful Saturn commitment that could help us through, right? That, that Capricorn moon, that's Saturn ruled, Saturn could help us here because we've developed some good spiritual practices. On the other side, we could say, I don't even want to. So, this full moon, right, is going to illuminate, it's going to be that spotlight on things that need to be released in order for us to continue forward. And this Neptune element could say, I don't want to see it, or I saw it and I don't want to deal with it, and kind of backslide a little bit. So that's the thing to have awareness on, right? It's not something to fear. It's more, you talk about astrology as the weather, knowing that the astrological weather is going to have this component of, I don't want to feel that. I'm going to go into escapism. Or, okay, I got to feel it and I got to use my practices that Saturn has been helping me develop over the last year or so, because I know if I do, I will be able to push through to the next phase of this manifestation.
This is what I love about making astrology tangible or any spiritual practice, right? Tangible, because I love that we can sort of preempt, like, if you happen to feel this, be stronger than it because you are stronger than it, right? This is about aligning with your soul self, not aligning with the small self, but having that awareness preemptively can really help us feel more empowered, I think, when that moment comes up to really take the reins and do what we need to do. And in this case, not escape, process your emotions, get back to a place of alignment, see the truth of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of being swept away by the patterns, right? Because patterns are deep grooves and they're just so easy to unconsciously fall into. So again, equating it to the weather, when you know that these energies are coming, it's just like knowing maybe I should bring an umbrella, right? I know the resources I need or the tools I need to be well. That's the word I want to say, like to be well within this energy that may pull you in another direction.
Yeah, so it sounds like as we think about full moons, I always think about the energy of releasing with full moons also. It is the energy of illumination, but also what is coming up to be released. And so is it quite literally with this moon, like emotions, like we need to be willing to lean in and release the emotions that are fueling a negative pattern.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, what it keeps when you pull it all together, it keeps coming back to not wanting to feel, but needing to feel. And so having that awareness that full moons are about releasing, but they're not the end of the cycle. And so that opportunity to release so that we can continue on growing that cycle, moving forward, as opposed to what may be like a death and rebirth. It's not an end and a new. That's actually more new moon energy or right before the new moon. Whereas the full moon is let's keep going, but release what's in the way.
That's such a nice way of putting it. I really like that. I want to anchor that one in.
So Yeah, it should be interesting for all of us, really. I think, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're talking about summertime, right? That like everyone, this is a transition time where we're starting to feel more fun coming in. It's the play of summer coming in. And then to have this kind of like, are you going to play in a productive way? Are you going to play in a way that sabotages you? Or are you going to release some things so you can really have the bounty? And one of the things that I didn't mention is that, Jupiter and Pluto, this trine it's still in action. It's separating. And so it's not quite as close as it used to be. But that follow-up from a few weeks before, where we do go deep to reap the rewards. It's like the last vestige of that energy is here. And it'll come back again at another time. But that's another thing that you can consider is maybe if I didn't go internal a couple weeks ago, maybe I could get this last bit of Jupiter trine Pluto energy to really find the internal treasure, the internal resources to help me through to the next step.
Yeah, I think that's important. I feel like this is super helpful in terms of how to leverage the energies. I also can already see based on my own healing journey, this is pointing me to thoughts I have that don't serve me. That alone is a pattern, right? A negative pattern of thinking in a way that's very limiting, in a way that cuts me off from prosperity, right? And so I can really see where, the new moon, what I would want to plant, and then equally with that full moon, I can see where the universe might challenge to say, where are we going to go? You going to choose the higher ground, or are we going to stay stuck in that, that 3D paradigm? So this is really, in a way, I feel like we can make it fun. Like I see you, I'm on it, and I am not going to fall into that trap, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think and that's one of the things too about if you know your chart and you know where these energies are happening in your chart, you can kind of dial in a little bit more to the main topics they're really hitting, right? So is that Neptune energy where you're potentially going towards a little bit more escapism or, spiritual bypassing, is that in relation to your home and family, or is that in relation to your health, or is that in relation to your friends and networks? It's when you are able to look at those specific placements, it helps you hone in a little bit more. I mean, I know as we're talking, where this is showing up for you. You can feel it, you can see it. But if you're like, I got nothing,
Yeah.
I don't know where this is going to show up, you can look at your chart and it's going to give you a little bit of an inkling. I know for me, this moon is in my first house, Neptune is in my third house, which is my neighborhood, short distance travel, communication. And so, how do those elements play into things about how I show up in the world? My physical body, my presentation, my character. How do I show up in the world? And then immediately just went, maybe you don't plan that last minute escape weekend field trip, like field trip, like day trip adventure, because you just want to get away from it all. Maybe you actually face whatever
What you need to face. Yeah. Really good. Really good. All right. Well, anything else that you feel like we need to know? I feel like we gave everybody a really good sense of the energies and how they can start to work with their own chart to really look at how this might be playing out for you. But clearly the message is don't escape, process your emotions. That seems to be the theme.
I only have one other little thing.
Yeah.
Trying to really think if I was going to put this in or not, but it's one tiny little thing. There's a sextile between Mars and Mercury. Sextile it's a positive aspect, but because Mercury is also really close to the sun, it's not kind of in its full power, and Mars is sharp. So just being conscious on where if if both of them were kind of in their full power, maybe that's just like quick-witted, passionate conversation, decisive communication. But with everything we've been talking about, there's not a lot of decisiveness, right? So it's almost like that little caveat of think about what you're going to say before you say it, because things can come out really sarcastic or sharp-tongued.
Right,
and
with an edge.
With an edge, especially if they're coming from the I didn't process my stuff energy.
Then you can be sure there's going to be an edge. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that it's a good connection, but it's also just being aware the sharpness that can happen as opposed to maybe the decisive and directness
that makes a lot of sense. And I think with everything else that you've been talking about, that really feeds into the discernment aspect where you really started this conversation, where we need to be really mindful about discerning our truth versus delusion, discerning, right? Have we processed our emotions? Are we clear? And are we communicating from that place of clarity? Are we communicating from a place of having that edge? So discernment seems to be a strong theme for this moon. Awesome. Yeah. Well, as
a little lighthearted,
yeah,
to be very discerning.
Yeah. I mean, there it is. Boom, right? Like process your emotions and discern. That's sage advice. And so on that note, thank you as always for being here and for taking the time to share this month's full moon energy update. And you can all find Catherine at catherineannenergy.com, and on YouTube as well for more of her videos. So stay tuned for the energy updates next month, and we will see you then. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.